Well, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this Mother's Day. We're so excited to be able to share a little bit of our stories with you and just have a conversation. What does motherhood look like? How does it impact us? And what kind of just resonates in our hearts? I know for me, Mother's Day was a day that was often really painful at the beginning. When my husband and I were first married, we ended up getting pregnant and we lost that baby. And then we got pregnant again, and we lost that baby. And then we got pregnant again, and we lost that baby. And at that point, they said to us, you might get pregnant, but you might not actually be able to ever carry a baby to term. And that was really hard for me. I really wrestled with each loss, but then also thinking, I feel like I'm supposed to be a mom. And I was already Auntie Tanisha to so many people's kids that I was just ready and excited for that to happen for me. So then when we got pregnant for the fourth time, there was a part of me that was just apprehensive and just wondering, is this actually going to happen? And we went to that ultrasound, and I was guarded, and we found out that everything was perfect. And all of the medical issues that had previously been an issue were just gone. And they were like, "What are you talking about? This looks like a great pregnancy." And after that, we very quickly had 3 kids in 3 years. And so, God knew what was up with that. But then shortly after our last one, shortly after our girls, we got pregnant for, I guess it would technically be a 7th time, but with our 4th baby. And things just went sideways. We'd gone for an ultrasound in the first trimester, and they said, "Hey, there's something up with his bladder. This is like an enlarged bladder, and the likelihood of him living very long isn't likely." And so all of a sudden we were hit with genetic counselors and seeing the best specialists in Alberta and wondering, is this going to last and is this going to work? And I think because I'd already had 3 healthy babies, I was like, I've already been through this pain. You can't take this away from me. And I was really hurt about it and really struggling with it. And they started to say, well, your baby might have these health challenges or these health challenges. And I was so angry. And I remember one day I was at the gym and I came home, and Joel had been listening to the Bible app, and he turned it off. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but that morning we were driving for an ultrasound, and he said something like, "Hey, I really want to tell you something, but I don't know if you want to hear it." And I was like, "Yeah, then I probably don't." And he said to me, he's like, "Hey, this morning I've been working through this devotional, and in the devotional that came up this morning was the story of Abraham and Isaac. And Isaac Abraham having to trust God with Isaac. And he's like, I feel like God is telling us, do you trust me with your baby, and do you trust me with your son?" And I was so mad. I was like, how dare you say that to me? I don't want to go there. That's good for you and God. I don't know if that's what I want God to say to me. That's good for you. I'm not sure if that's good for him to say to me. And we got to the ultrasound that day, and they said, "Hey, it looks like things actually might be getting better." And I slept for 6 hours in the middle of the day. I don't think I realized how much I was carrying that, but it wasn't for certain yet. And so I was still kind of on eggshells, wondering, do I get to keep this baby? And then there was a quote by Lisa Turkhurst that I heard, and she said, "Each of my children have a calling to reveal elements of the kingdom of heaven." And I just realized that God had given me this baby, and he'd given me 3 other babies, but it wasn't my call to make on how long I get to hold on to those babies. But it is my call on what I speak over them, how I advocate for them, how I show up at those doctor's appointments and reflect things. And I realized that whether my baby was going to be with me just inside of me or longer than that I wanted to be able to have more of a legacy for them. we ended up getting a phone call from our midwife a few weeks after that, and she was like, okay, are you ready for this? And she was like, okay, there is nothing wrong with your baby, 100% nothing wrong, and it's a boy. So after our 3 girls, it was a boy, and Joel might have known some things, but there's a verse. Yeah, we'll just keep going, right? He might have known some things. But there's a verse in Proverbs that says that the tongue has the power to speak life and death. Yeah. And I think just remembering for me, and what I would want to just encourage any other mom, is that no matter what the circumstances, our God is still faithful. Right? No matter what our answers are, God is still faithful. But we can change the narrative simply in how we speak about it. And that was something that just resonated with me through those challenges.
So good. I know, like, that really resonates with me, and I love your vulnerability in having this conversation, because both of my pregnancies were also high-risk pregnancies, and with Madison, who was our first, who's now 15, we had some early complications, and then we had complications all the way through the pregnancy. Even towards the end, we ended up having an emergency C-section, and it was just, it was a really difficult time. And I remember being a first mom, you're like going through your prenatal classes, and you're like expecting all this like beautiful outcome. And I was like one of those people. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do like the whole like no medications, like pain-free. It's gonna be super smooth. And then expectation versus reality when you're like having an emergency C-section, and your blood pressure is through the roof, and you're swelling up like crazy, and just how you internalize and wrestle with all the emotions of that expectation versus reality. And then we thought we were going to be in the clear with the second one. And so Grayson, who's our son, he's 9 now. Just with his pregnancy was fairly smooth, but then with the delivery side of it, again, was a C-section, but also struggling with blood pressure and that kind of thing afterwards. And then to kind of the icing on the cake was he was having some reflux issues, and after he was born and we brought him home, there was a couple times where he stopped breathing. And we brought him into the hospital, and they're like, oh, there's nothing wrong. And I'm like, well, like my son's not breathing, and he's like turning blue, and there's something wrong. And then so we had to advocate for him a fair bit on the medical side. And then finally we went in the one day, and I was like, I'm not going anywhere until you find out what's wrong, because I'm not sleeping. And this is what this has been like the last couple weeks. And then there was a pediatrician there that day, and he was like, I know what's going on, like we've seen this before, and he put him on medication. It never happened again. But how we internalize all those situations, and going through this first seasons as a mom, like, to be honest, like it wasn't like a joyous, wonderful time. Like the pregnancies were not like this glowing, magnificent thing that was happening, and like you almost feel shortchanged, and like I kind of did in that motherhood journey kind of thing. And it was like, okay, like, God, why is this happening the way it is? Like other people, like this is so easy, and like why does this feel like this is so difficult? Now I'm happy to say that our kids are older and we're past that stage of life. Although we have new problems now, like our daughter's going to get her driver's license here in the next little bit, and so that's like a new level of like prayer life for like parents that have like kids that are starting to get their driver's license. That's just like a whole new level of like trust and prayer, and trusting them with the world, right? And I think one of the things that we learned through the early stages of our parenting is just being super intentional with the times that you do have in between things. And it's not so much about finding those perfect teachable moments, but it's those everyday moments. Yes. It's the things that happen as you're driving your kids to school, and it's the fruit that comes out of the things like that. And I think it's important that we remember that you have to intentionally invest in the harvest that you want to see. You have to intentionally plant those seeds to get the fruit that you want. And it's the accumulation of all those little things. So we get the privilege of driving our kids, and we commute a little bit, so it's like a 20-minute car ride to and from school. So we get 20 minutes a day where our daughter's filling us in, and all the fun things that happen throughout the day, and the boys, and all the like friendship struggles. And we get 20 minutes as parents to talk to them about how their day went and how they're interpreting that information. And even though we're like planting these seeds intentionally, it's important how they understand the information, because information is so readily accessible now, and technology is everywhere. And one of the battles we constantly fight, like, and our kids are in that preteen and teenager age, and so we're constantly fighting this battle with technology and making sure that Alexa is not the one that's raising our children. Like, our son has an Alexa in his room. Well, both of them have an Alexa, but our son is more of our facts guy. And so he asks Alexa everything, like everything. And so the other day, like, him and his sister were kind of fighting. So I'm sorry, this is real life. They're having a bit of a disagreement. And he turns to Alexa and he's like, Alexa, what do I do when my sister's mean to me? I'm serious. And then Alexa was like, call 911. I know. So it's like, we have to be super intentional about, like, one, where our kids go to for information, how they get that information, how they read that information. And it made me think about, when I was thinking about what we're going to talk about, it made me think about, we live in the Okanagan, or like we lived in the Okanagan previously, and there's orchards everywhere. And when you drive by, like, the orchards and stuff like that, like, certain times of the year, they have like netting over the orchards and over the trees to protect the fruit, right? And so what we do with the words and the environments and the spaces that we create is we create a filter that they process the information through. So it's transparent, it's letting the rain, it's letting the sun, it's letting all the good things in, but it's filtering out the things that don't need to be there, that are going to destroy the immature fruit that's growing in their life. And so as parents, it's our job to protect that fruit and to help provide that filter so that the good things get in, but it keeps the things like the birds out, and the things that are going to destroy that harvest that you want later, and the character and the intentionality that you're building into your children. And I think it's just one thing for parents to know, it's the days are long, but the seasons are short. And we just have to be super intentional with the time and what we do in those, like, in-between times, bedtimes. Like, we still pray with our kids at night at 9 and 15, and we still tuck them in. I'm sorry, I'm like spilling everything on my daughter. She's going to be so embarrassed. But yeah, we still sit on the edge of their bed at night, and we still talk to them about their day and how they process the day and all the things that are kind of on their hearts. And then we pray with them, and our 9-year-old son prays for his little girlfriend crush, and it's the cutest thing ever. And, like, someday if they actually end up being a thing, it'll be the cutest story ever to be like, I was 9-year-old and praying for you. Like, it's just, cool. It's adorable. But, like, that's the fruit that you're trying to create.
So good. I love that, Jen. I love how you're being intentional with speaking life over your kids with the time that you have with them as they're growing. And I remember the first time when I first had Hudson, and they're in that really cute baby stage, and I don't know if this has happened to you guys, but they're so cute, and people are stopping you and they want to look at your baby, and then something shifts, and I don't know if it's like when they're grumpy and they have their first tooth coming in and they're screaming in the stores, but all of a sudden people's narrative changes and they say things like, just wait until they're teenagers. This is going to be payback for when you were a teenager. And that never really settled well with me, having other people speaking such harsh words over my kids who can't even form a word yet. They haven't had a chance to even vocalize or speak for themselves, and people are saying things that I would never want to wish over my kids. The power of life and death is in the tongue, and we've talked about that from Proverbs. But raising teenagers, I have a 15-year-old and I have a 12-and-a-half-year-old, because she wants you to know that she is halfway to being 13. It has been incredible. They are the coolest kids. If you ever have a chance to meet them, they are the coolest kids. Seeing them become who they are in front of my eyes, and the changing dynamic that we have in their lives is heartbreaking, but also really cool to see the things that they've learned from you. Having a close relationship with our kids stems from being involved with them when they were young, and loving everything when they were young. From Tenley's crazy cat lady stage, where she literally had 5 cats. They all looked the same except for one, and they would go everywhere with her. Mommy kitty, daddy kitty, baby kitty, no one, and Cola. No one did not look like the rest of them. They were stuffies, and they were cats from the Scholastic Book Fair, and they all went everywhere. All 5 of them needed to come with us. Or like Hudson hopping down the street thinking he is Mario with his mustache. All of those like really cute little memories. But it's being involved in the everyday even when sometimes they need to teach you again and again all the hockey terms so that you can also watch hockey with them and not annoy them, of course. But this builds a foundation for when they're teenagers, when they're becoming and testing everything that you've taught them. You're just being present with them, and that's what you said, Jen. You're just present when you have them in your possession. But the words you speak to them become their inner voice and their inner dialogue, because you are the biggest person in their lives growing up. So your words matter. The words you speak become the house that you live in. So the words you're speaking to your kids becomes the environment and the atmosphere in your home. The words you speak over your kids become the framework of how they shape their lives. So you have to change the narrative. Again, the power of life and death is in the tongue. So we do this with our kids a lot. When they feel like they can't accomplish something or something seems hard, we have them change the way that they're thinking through the process and maybe teaching them a way through it that it could be a little bit easier. Teaching them to shift their mindset and inner and sometimes their outward dialogue, because that can happen. And watching as they are so proud once they've accomplished it, and being proud with them and celebrating with them. But the best part is when you find your children changing the narrative for their friends. When they're sending texts to their friends, and their friends are saying things like, oh, I sucked at basketball today, that picture of me, I don't like the way my hair is in there, and I've been catching Tenley texting her friends and changing the narrative for them, so changing it into a positive thing. You're teaching them that their voice matters, and that they are important, and what they value is also important to you. The power of being present results in a relationship with your teenagers where they want to come to you with the big and the small. And this will set the foundation of your relationship as they go into adulthood. My kids still text my mom to come over and just hang out with them, because she has intentionally built a relationship with them when they were little, and everything mattered to her, and everything still matters to her, where Hudson will text her to come and just chill in his room, because he's so proud that it's clean and he wants to show her the things he's been building. But it's because she listened to the small. Your children only get one childhood, and it will affect how they view the world, how they love and how they trust and how they feel secure. Every time you interact with them, you have the power to cherish or to crush their lives.
That's so good.
You are totally right. I agree. I love that. I also love teenagers, and I feel like they get a bum rap, and I try to change the narrative where I go, and I'm like, no, teens are really fun. This is really awesome. They don't have to be like that, the way everybody says. And I love your story about your grandma. Our kids live next door to their grandma, and they have our middle son has a book club that he does with her, because she cares about what he cares about, and he brings her books, and it's so important to build those relationships. So our family, we're raising our 3 kids out in the country. They're 14, 12, and 10. Everybody's moving up a year here in the summer. And I homeschool our kids. So we also live next door to my nearly 80-year-old mother, who is widowed, and I am now her primary care provider, as well as homeschooling mom and all the things that we do. So when I was thinking about what to talk about today, because it makes me very nervous to do the talking, God kept bringing me back to what's become a bit of a mantra for our family. Not that I did it on purpose, but I say that we can do hard things for various reasons, and throughout different seasons in our life, we've experienced a lot of stuff. I have crazy big stories that are wild and wonderful, and I was thinking maybe not everybody has big wild stories. They have dramatic and traumatic birthing stories with their kids, or their big conversion coming to faith moments in life, and their parents dying and things like that. But I'm pretty sure that everybody's faced difficult situations, and so I feel that it's somewhat relatable. So somewhere along the way in our life, when I was doing hard things, I started just saying, no, I can do this. I can do this. And it was in my head, and I would repeat it to myself, and then sometimes I started saying it out loud when I needed the reminder, because things were a little too hard. Sometimes I switched it to say, no, we can do this. This is something that we can get through together. And as our kids have gotten older, I've started saying it to them and with them. So sometimes circumstances just suck, and you're stuck with whatever you're going through. Yeah. So rather than hating life and being frustrated, I think it's okay to recognize that things can be hard and remind ourselves that we have done tough things before and we've come out on the other side. So that's what I try to speak into our kids' lives. Also, I don't mean like me personally. I am totally doing all the hard things. I mean like through Christ, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, not like Kara's got it. But it's a good, quick reminder just to be able to say, like, I can do this. We can do hard things. Sometimes also we're not going to get through things perfectly and wonderfully, which can be frustrating. Sometimes things just don't work out the way that we hope they would. But so far in my life, God has shown me that his plans have always been better than mine. Sometimes it takes me a while to figure it out. And that's something that I like to be able to bring our kids back to and say, remember that time? This is what God did. But doing hard things can mean a lot of different things and come in a lot of different forms. It doesn't have to be the awful thing. It can be, like in our house, doing a difficult math lesson or learning a new song on the piano, getting braces or needing to have multiple oral surgeries to fix things, performing dance on stage or speaking in public, dealing with cranky or frustrating people, caring for sick kids, holding a parent's hand as they die, keeping up with the never-ending mountain of laundry and dishes. There's a ton of things that can make the list, and sometimes it depends on what's going on in your world and how much bandwidth you have to actually hold that space too. But personally, I would take it even further and say that hard is not actually the same as bad. And if we reframe that, and that's quoting one of the favorite ladies on the internets that I follow, author and mom, Abby Halberstadt, hard is not the same as bad. And when I started thinking about that, it switched for me. And I'm able to speak that into my kids more now. Some of the best moments and memories that I've collected so far in life have come from the toughest, most painful experiences that I've had. But had I not gone through that storm, we never would have seen the beauty that came after the rainbow, if you will, that comes after the storm. I want to model doing hard things well for my kids. That's what I've decided. We're in that season. Seasons come and go, but it sometimes feels like it's a long season. But I want to model doing hard things well for my kids. And James 1, verses 2 and 3 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that testing of your faith produces perseverance." So far, I've found that the trials reveal the faith that we have. And then it continues to build more faith once you make it through. And for the sake of keeping things as short as I can, I'm going to cut a bit of this verse out, although my husband likes me to, full verse things, but it's not happening. Romans 5, verse 3-4 says, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that our sufferings produce perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character, hope." I want hope-filled kids. I want kids with strong character, who have servant hearts because they grew up caring for their very own widow and they learned what putting others before themselves looks like. And I want strong character kids. I want hope-filled kids. I want kids who can persevere. I want to be like that myself, and I think it's worth striving for. That's the season that we're in that I have felt is, hard, but super good and super worth it so far.
So valuable. Absolutely. I mean, as we've kind of heard throughout this talk so far, is that our words are really powerful. And they have not only ability to shape our kids' lives, but your life, right, as parents and how we look at the world. So I have the distinct privilege of being a mom to 3 beautiful kids and 3 adorable grandkids. But as we've kind of heard, parenting is complicated. And it doesn't always start the way that we had planned. And the story of my firstborn son, Christopher, I met him when he was a year old. And he was this adorable, chubby baby full of curiosity with a huge sensitive heart and easily crushed by harsh words or hurtful things, right? And he had a mom and dad who loved him sincerely, but didn't love each other. And unfortunately, as they navigated the tension-filled world of negotiating visits, hurtful words, blame, and miscommunication was very common. And unfortunately, we saw the impact our words had on this beautiful baby boy. Yeah. And I mean, maybe your story doesn't start out that way. Maybe you're not navigating split relationships and single parenting. Maybe you're a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle who's watching somebody do this. Maybe you're happily married, but when the tension builds and the fights come, sometimes we let words slip that maybe we shouldn't around our children. And the truth is our kids join us on the journey through the rough seasons in our relationships. And when we're angry, frustrated, or just overwhelmed, it's easy to let those words slip. Yeah. But we have to remember that we're not just throwing daggers, we're actually throwing grenades. And it hits everyone in the family. And the only ones we're hurting are those that we ultimately love the most. In fact, your words can affect their mental health and neurological development. So studies show that exposure to negative stressful situations can actually lead to long-term changes in their brain function and structure, right? It can put them at higher risk of developing physical health problems, and it skews their understanding of what a relationship, a healthy relationship, looks like. But ultimately, it can affect their identity, right? They may feel like they have to choose sides, or they cannot express their love for one parent without fear of hurting the other. And this leads to insecurity, low self-esteem, and trust issues. Now, we've talked before about Proverbs 18:21, but what I love is the Passion Translation. It says, your words are so powerful that they kill or give life. Yeah. So notice there's no, life, death, and then words that don't have any meaning. There are no neutral words, life or death. So we have to be very careful what we're talking about. And as parents and grandparents, we all want the best for our kids. Absolutely. But it can be challenging to talk positively, especially when we're hurt or angry. So what do? We need to remember that our words have the power to shape their perceptions of themselves and the world around them. So I want to give you 3 quick things to remember the next time that your temperature starts to rise, which never happens. Never happens. Right? I want you to be kind and respectful of the other parent. While you might not agree with everything, you can agree that your child's feeling of security and self-worth is absolutely worth the effort. Right? Value your child's relationship with that parent. And finally, set a good example. Remember that your kids loves that parent, and their closest relationships are a model for their future, and it will impact their perception of how they deal with conflict. So imagine if we could shape a world where our children value each other even when they don't disagree, right? Yeah. And that they understand that they are more important than our personal preferences. Yeah. So I want to leave you with this. Your words shape their world. And Annie Stanley says it this way, and I think you referred to it in yours, is that the way you talk to our children becomes their inner voice. So let's remember to parent with the relationship in mind. And I know, Cindy, you and I, we've talked a lot about parenting, and actually, more recently, the joy of grandparenting, because that's the best.
I'm on Team Grandkids. So there's a saying, I'm sure we've all heard it, where if you had once you have your grandkids, you wish you would have had them first. It's so true. There's a special love. I know when we have our kids, our hearts just grow, and we're like, how could we love so much? But when you have your grandkids, Heidi, it expands even more. And I remember when we had our first son, Cody, my mom and dad were, I'm sure we could all say this, but in my opinion, the best grandparents and parents. They're just so good and taught me so much. They came over every single day to the point where we would see their heads as they walked by our kitchen, and Ralph would yell, hide. It was that annoying sometimes, but guess who does that now? Me. Uninvited or not, I go see my grandkids. And I learned from my mom and dad that from the early ages of their grandkids to speak into their lives, to what we've all talked about. Well, we extend that into our grandkids. My dad would take the boys at every stage right until they were probably 18 or 19 when we lost my dad, for lunch, for supper, talked to them, and they shared things with Grandpa that they felt they couldn't share with us. Yeah. One time, funny story, my dad took Cody on a camping trip. My dad was a real camper and loved to fish. We're going to go for a few days, Cody and I. Taking Cody, he was retired at this time. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We were like, Mom was like, have you heard from him? Are they alive? That was the kind of grandparent he was, and that's what they taught me. I have Deuteronomy 4:9. Teach what you've seen and heard to your children and your grandkids. 2 Timothy 1:5 says that precious memory triggers another, your honest faith. And what a rich faith it is, handed down from your grandma to your mother and then to you. I have a few things that I want that my mom and dad impacted me that if you're a grandparent, I don't know, I think it would help you too. Or it's the first thing my mom and dad taught me is grandparents truly impact their grandkids' lives. This is so true. What we know, the wisdom we've gained just in life's experiences, we need to share it. Share it with your kids, but also your grandkids. Yes. We've sat across from so many couples that are struggling, and you know, quite often they'll say, even in their upbringing, we'll say, well, what was your upbringing like? Oh, it was a struggling home. But man, my grandparents were my security. They were my stability. So what you impact, whatever you have, impacts not only your kids, but your grandkids. Yes. Also, I love this one. Grandkids can greatly reduce household stress, and they provide free childcare. Right? So my mom was so amazing at, Cindy, we're taking the kids tonight. When we first had kids, we were always broke, of course. Here's some money, go out for dinner. Because she knew the importance of a healthy marriage was healthy kids and a healthy family. I love that. Thirdly, grandparents provide a sense of security. We have 2 grandkids, a grandson, he's 10, he just turned 2 digits, and a granddaughter who's 4. Our grandson will quite often say, Grandma, can I stay at your house tonight? I'd like to think it's because he loves us so much, but I honestly think he's trying to get away from his sister. Either way, we'll take it. And you know, whenever he asks, we always say yes, and those times that we have had with him, when he stays at our house, he has shared the most intimate pieces of his heart with no judgment and with unconditional love. It's such a bonding time, I wouldn't change it for the world. Absolutely. Psalm 145:4 says, generation after generation stands in awe of your work. The final thing my mom and dad taught me is grandparents are the ultimate storytellers. I loved hearing stories of my mom and dad and how they grew up and how they met. I could tell you everything of every piece of their life. And Dutch and Delilah are 2 grandkids, that's their names. Love hearing stories about Ralph and I and how we met, but they also love hearing about their dad. What was dad like when he was my age? What did dad do? It is a time where you share your heritage and your generation to generation. And it's important that they hear that, and they love to hear that. Finally, I'd like to say, as we can all tell, the common thread is speak into your kid's life. And it was a God thing that we all brought this to the table because it wasn't a planned thing. So speak into your grandkids' life. Tell them they're valuable. Tell them they're loved. No matter what, it's okay to make mistakes. You can tell Grandma anything, and Grandpa too if you'd like, but Grandma mostly. Trust your feelings. It's okay not to be okay. Yes. And finally, the most important, when Mom and Dad say no, ask Grandma. And when Grandma says no, oh wait, who are we kidding? Grandma never says no. Am I right, Heidi?
Absolutely, but you're giving away our secrets.
So ladies, this has been incredible. Yes. What incredible ladies we have. Happy Mother's Day to all you mothers out there. And we don't want to end without saying a prayer of blessing over you. So ladies, we thank you for your moms. What a privilege and an honor it is to be a mom. And not just biological moms, but moms that God has brought young ones into your lives to mentor and to nurture. Thank you for the role that you play in your family unit and in our churches. Thank you for your unconditional love, your wisdom, your understanding. Thank you, ladies, for physical, emotional, and spiritual gifts that you possess, that you bring into your family. Thank you that moms are a blessing to their children. And Lord, we pray that you give moms continued direction and the raising of their children, all the way from, like Tanisha shared, babies, all the way through each of these ladies to grandparenting. Amen.